So for step 42, attaching the RC equipment, well, you can see we've got these two pieces, D5s, which will then be attached to the servo, and then we're going to be attaching that to our main chassis. And then, of course, we've got the receiver and the ESC that's all got to go on as well. Now, you can see with this, there's some aluminum glass tape that's going to hold the wire down because the battery has to go over top of that. And we've got this little piece of sponge tape. Now, what's interesting is they've already pre-cut that sponge tape, so we don't have to do anything with that. And of course, they're showing the double-sided tape there, which the ESC actually comes with its own double-sided tape. And I will be using Velcro for the receiver because I use my receivers for multiple kits. And we won't be doing that because that's to do with the Tamiya speed controller. So we've got these MA4 screws for the servo itself, but notice this, and this is the first time I've seen it in any of the Tamiya kits. Affix small receiver switches to the damper stay if it's not a Tamiya on-off switch, which that receiver switch right there, you can see, is pretty much the same shape as the Hobbywing speed controller receiver switch. So that's pretty interesting. Maybe they're finally doing that with some of their newer manuals. And then of course there's our chassis. So that's what we need to be working with. So we've got all of this to now install into our chassis. So I'll set this up and we'll get started. So first off, let's get the servo brackets attached to the servo. So you can see here that based on the design, it's looking like this side that is not open, you can see that that side is open, that side is closed. It looks like the closed side is going to be facing towards the bracket on the servo itself. And we're going to be using these MC3 screws, which are really flat-headed screws at the top. And then, of course, we've got our MA11, so they are the washers. So that's got to go on first. Then we're going to put it through the top of the hole in the top part of the bracket, and then we need to screw these down. So let's do that. Let's get this one started. Just make sure that goes in level, which it's not yet, but that's okay. We just need to make sure we can get that going in there. Yes, that looks level, so we can attach that. And this screw seems to be going into this quite well. A lot of the times you find that they're a tougher fit for some reason, but this doesn't feel bad at all. It's going in nicely. So the other thing to make note of is you're going to want to make sure that that bracket is at the top so that it's level with the base of the servo, because that's how it's going to attach to the chassis. So make sure that that's all the way up. So I'm just going to screw this in just a little bit more. And that seems pretty good. So it's all the way at the top. That's now level with the base of the servo. So we're good with that. So that's done. Now we're going to do the other side. Same idea. So we'll get that one up, and you can see that the screws are at the top for both. They don't stagger them. Make sure that that is going in level. Come on, there we go. I'm gonna have to put my thumb there just to make sure that that goes into the hole. sure that's right. Yes. So now I can hold this down and we'll screw this in. There we go. And again, I'm just going to make sure that that's level. So I'm just going to loosen this off just a touch, push this towards this direction, and then lock it down. So I'm just doing a last minute check, make sure that both are on nice and tight. Yes. And yes. So that is how it will look. The screws are at the top, and then those brackets are nicely flush with the base of the servo so that we can install it into the chassis. So based on this, and I think we will get the servo in place first, you can see that there's a piece of sponge tape which is going to sit there because the servo, and you can see the two holes, one and one, is going to sit down there like that. And I'm going to have to play around with the cabling, but you can see that the servo saver is actually sitting on top of that sponge tape. So knowing that, we are definitely going to have to get this into place first. So let's get the paper off, which can be annoying, but there we go. All right, so let's make sure that we can get this in place. So I'm going to try and do it this way. Get that into the corner. There we go. It's nicely into the corner. So there's our piece of sponge tape. And now this is going to sit down here. Now I'm just looking at the way that cable is. I'm going to pull that up and maybe bend it up that way so that this is going to sit down there like that. And then that cable, see where it is. You don't want it in there apparently because it's not showing that at this stage, but it is over here. So it is showing that that's going to go through the slot. So if we do this right, you're going to want to make sure that it bends like that so that this doesn't get all twisted. So you're going to want to sit that down there and let that wrap around there. See how that cable is? Now it's not bending or binding anywhere, and it will be out of the way. So we've got that done. So what do we need to do? We've got our MA4 screws that now have to go into those holes. So let's do that. And the other one, just going to turn this around, it'll be easier. Now it's interesting because in the older Tamiya kits, one would have a screw hole, one would have basically like an oval open hole to allow you to maneuver the the servo so that it can fit better. This does not do that. I don't know if you saw what I just did there, but because I wasn't paying attention, I actually went beside the hole, not into the hole. So I'm just moving it again, and let's make sure that that actually is showing, finding the hole. There we go. So with these ones, you're actually, there is no adjustment to do. Once they're screwed in, that's it. That's the final placement for it. So there we go. There are the two screws holding the servo in, and there is our servo with our sponge tape, and you can see that the wire is going through there and out. We'll figure out where we're putting that afterwards, but at least that's out of the way for now. So the servo sits like that. I actually quite like the placement of it because it seems very secure and it's in its own pocket there. Very cool. Okay, so the next thing we need to do is we've got to place the receiver and place our ESC. Now, what's interesting is they're showing that the receiver, and you can see from this diagram here, sits at this side and the ESC sits at the other side. So for the receiver, you can kind of see, based on the positioning of this, they want where the cables fit into to be facing that side. So let's do that. Now, as I said before, I don't use the double-sided tape. I use the Velcro. So I'm actually going to put the Velcro backing onto one side here. And that way I can kind of figure out my positioning. Now, based on what they're showing, and you can see that the plastic has been leveled out, so it's nice and flat. There's almost like a ridge that's been created. It's pretty much showing that it's right at the back side of that. So let's do it. Let's put that here. And I'm just going to turn this around to make this easier on me. So you can see the edging. I'm going to put this to the edge. And there we go. So there is our receiver in place. And I can just peel this off when I need to be able to use the receiver another time for a different kit. But for now, that's what we're going to do. Now, the next thing that we need to do is put on our ESC. Now, obviously, because of the battery and the motor wires, etc., we want them facing back. So it's the same sort of plan again, and they've built a little bit of a ledge here. This is going to sit here, and those motor wires are going to face back. And I will say this, that because in the newer Tamiya kits, they don't actually have the greatest length for the motor leads, and there's not much in the way of motor leads on the 1060 speed controller, that you do want to face it back. I would not want to do that because there's a chance those wires would not reach the motor. So we're gonna install it that way, and these will reach the back end and the motor in much more easily. And then of course the same thing with our battery cable. So I'm okay with that placement. So we're going to take our double-sided tape that comes with the 1080 or 1060 ESC. I'm gonna put that on there. There we go. And based on the where they're showing this going, I'm probably gonna have this as far back as possible. So let's take this part off. Again, the backing tape it's pretty sticky. It sticks to the rest of it. Come on. I'm gonna use my... Oh, I'm almost got it. Come on. Just needed to get started. I'm going to try doing it this way. There we go. Finally. Okay. I can slant that, push that back. And again, now we're going to place this, I think, as far back as we can. So that will mean that I'm going to want this back here. It's almost exactly where it should go. So there we go. So those wires are going to go to our motor. That's going to go to our battery. And now what we have to do is feed the cable through so that it will reach over here. So based on the way this is done, you can see that it's going to go down and through. Yeah, I guess so. It's interesting the way that is done, because now it doesn't matter for the purposes of what we're doing because we're not going to use that space, but this needs to go in underneath, and I want to make sure that it goes in the correct way so that it will be nice and flat. And up through there. So if you can see what I'm doing, I want to make sure that the black wire is coming out at the other side so that it's not binding anything on this side. And again, we don't need to worry about the on-off switch area because we're not going to be using it. So now that that's on that side, we need to use the aluminum glass tape to hold it in place and cover this. So I'm just going to cut the aluminum tape to the correct size, and then we'll come back. So the aluminum glass tape is actually kind of the perfect width for this already. So what I've done is I've cut off the piece that I want, and I kind of used a Sharpie so I could get a fairly clean cut on both sides. So now it's just going to be a matter of sticking that down. So let's do that. Let's get this off the backing tape. There we go. And what I'll do is I'm going to try and get this as level but sort of between the two sides as best I can. And then we'll just roll it back until we're at the other side. And there we go. So that keeps our cable out of the way, and that'll act a bit of a heat shield because the battery obviously is sitting right here. So that's that part done. So we've got our ESC installed, we've got our receiver installed, we've got our servo installed, and what's next? No, that is it. So we are good to go. Now they're showing the zip straps, you know, in terms of cable management. I'm not there yet. I kind of wait until I see everything else in place, like with the cable motors, you know, for the wires to the motor, etc. And of course, this isn't going to be fitting into there. It's going to be fitting, according to this, onto the damper stay. So we're going to wait until the next step anyway. So for me, that is the end of step 42. So we're going to move on to step 43 now and attach the gearbox to the chassis.